Nice to be with everyone. So as we jump in, I'm going to try to look at the chat a bit, but that's where Mara has to do all of her work to bring things forward, so that we can be able to engage and be present with the text. So Torah study, the blessing ends la'asok b'divrei Torah, so I want to jump right in. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So as we are going to jump in, there's actually going to be a lot of text here, and it's not my ideal, except that I'm trying to get into something. So it's 45 minutes. Don't leave early, please. But okay, lovely to see everyone. Mara, if I could have my PowerPoint back, or if I have to bring it up, that's fine.
If you don't mind resharing it, that'd be great.
All right, you're all gonna have to like see all my stuff here, as long as I can find where my PowerPoint is. That's not it.
A sign of a good rabbi is someone who has a lot of tabs.
I guess so. I'm not sure. I'm gonna bring it up to myself first before I bring it up to everyone else. So sorry. And now I'm the one using up this time. How awful is that? There it is. Okay, we're getting closer. We are getting closer. That's just embarrassing. Okay. Yeah, next time you have to warn me. Oh, there's my family. See, I didn't do it so well after all. That's not it either. Where did we go? Okay.
At least we get to see a nice family.
They're alone. That's my daughter's
There we go.
ordination party. Anyway, okay. Sorry, everyone. Here we go. Okay. So what I want to do is, first of all, thank My Jewish Learning for the opportunity to dig into Torah with all of you. I always learn so much, even, I hate to say it, after the fact, when I get to go back and read the chat, because I didn't have time to fully engage with it, but I really do go back and read the chat, and it's so wonderful to learn together. So what I want to do is now, as it were, a little bit later than I thought, jump right in. And so I want to give you some background, and I guess I'll do probably the reading, or if someone wants to read, we could figure that out. But I'll just start with here. So setting the stage, Leviticus 3:5-10. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Advance the tribe of Levi and place its men." It doesn't say men, that's why it's in brackets. "In attendance upon Aaron the priest to serve him. They shall perform duties for him and for the whole community before the tent of meeting, doing the work of the tabernacle. They shall take charge of all the furnishings of the tent of meeting, a duty on behalf of the Israelites doing the work of the tabernacle. You shall assign the Levites to Aaron and to his sons. They are formally assigned to him from among the Israelites. You shall make Aaron and his sons responsible for observing their priestly duties, and any outsider who encroaches shall be put to death." That's pretty harsh. But as we look at this, we want to think about, okay, where are we, right? What's happening? So if we were at the very beginning of the book of Numbers, we would actually be seeing that it is about numbers, though the first word is Bamidbar. They're in the wilderness. There are censuses happening and so forth about the fighting forces, but about also the tabernacle forces, so to speak. So we have this, and the Levites have these very particular jobs to do. And so as they are being counted, a little bit more by name than when it was bigger forces, right? Obviously, the Levites are a smaller group of people. So they are descended from Aaron. So they are recording the names of Levi's sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, which are three, not just individual sons, but three groupings. Each had its own tasks to do. We're going to focus on the Kohathites. They were in charge of the most important components of the temple. So we could name those off the top of our heads, of course: the ark, the table of display, the bowls, the ladles, the lampstand, the altar, all of these kinds of things. And it's interesting because they're listed first, but they are not firstborn. So that always means there's something going on, right? So what's going on is it is because of the greater responsibility and the hazard to them, right? They too have it, not just the outsiders here who are right on our text, but the others as well have a the Kohathites have hazard. The Gershonites are largely in charge of the tent curtains, and the Merarites, the structural parts, the planks, the bars, the posts, and so forth. So as we get into the text itself, we're going to go forward to start to read. And Mara, tell me your preference. Do we want readers, or do we want to be stuck with my voice? What's easiest?
Right now, I would love to hear more of your voice. But we
No,
can
look at
call on
that.
some readers soon.
Look how she did that. Okay, so so Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, right, standard beginning, take again, brackets means it's not actually in the text, but take us, and this all from Sepharia, take a separate census of the Kohathites among the Levites by the clans of their ancestral house, from the age of 30 years up to the age of 50, all who are subject to service to perform tasks for the tent of meeting. This is the responsibility of the Kohathites in the tent of meeting, the most sacred objects. At the breaking of camp, Aaron and his son shall go in and take down the screening curtain and cover the ark of the pact with it. So I'm gonna stop there and kind of work through some of this. And again, Mara, if you see questions or comments come up, please share them. So age 30 to 50 is interesting because it starts at age 20 for the fighting forces, right? And so given that we're going to see the Kohathites are the ones who have to do a lot of like heavy sacred lifting, and yet they have to be a little bit older, right? So I don't know what years we would compare 30 to 50 nowadays, right? But these are relatively older people who are going to be doing this work. So it's interesting in terms of this work is actually described differently. And I did not give all the Hebrew, my apologies. I just thought we would have so many slides and it's so much in our faces, it's hard to look at. But the word here is melacha, which we might recognize from like the don't do on Shabbat word, melacha. And it's a different term than is used for the fellow Levites, the Gershonites and the Merarites. So Ora Chaim brings us forward and says, like, what's that about? And it says that what the Kohathites did actually did not qualify as avodah, priestly service, or sacred, we could even say sacred service. But rather, and I love what Or HaChaim, if nothing else, so if you do have to leave early, just catch this next sentence. What Or HaChaim says is that on the contrary, the ark is reputed to have carried its carriers. You gotta love that, right? I mean, right? The ark is reputed to have carried its carriers. So the Kohathites did melacha, ordinary work, even though they're with the most sacred, right? We're seeing this, the most sacred object. So how is it ordinary? So they were honored to carry the holy ark on their shoulders to perform the physical labor as part of their assigned tasks. So they use the word melacha because it's physical labor. And the others didn't do the same kind of physical work, which is interesting because if you're schlepping the posts and so forth, it seems pretty physical to me. But this age is that they need the strength to do it, but also I'm going to say some wisdom, right? They have to be old enough to recognize what it is that they are actually carrying, that they are literally shouldering. So Eitz Chaim commentary points out that after 50, if you think about like what does a retired Kohathite do, they, as was said, need more wisdom and less strength. So they would sing the Psalms, they would open and close the gates, and they would mentor up and coming Levites. So it is here where they have the most sacred object, and yet the word is not what we expect, right? It's just a regular work word more than a sacred task word. So I'm going to go on unless I hear Mara stopping me, which I don't yet. Okay, so we're going to keep going through this text, and the thing we're going to really look at is colors and covering, layers and colors. They shall lay a covering of dolphin skin over it and spread a cloth of pure blue on top, and they shall put its poles in place. Over the table of display, they shall spread a blue cloth. They shall place upon it the bowls, the ladles, the jars, and the libation jugs, and the regular bread shall rest upon it. They shall spread over these a crimson cloth, which they shall cover with a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put the poles in place. Then they shall take a blue cloth and cover the lampstand for lighting with its lamps, its tongs, and its fire pans, as well as the oil vessels that are used in its service. They shall put it and all its furnishings into a covering of dolphin skin, which they shall then place on a carrying frame. So here we go. So let's just start by going a half step back. This is going to let me go a half step back. No, oh, that's forward. That doesn't work. Oh, man. All right, wait, back. Oh, don't you hate when things like this happen? All right, wait.
Wait, while you're here, is it possible to share your slides? There are folks who are looking to open the text on their own computer.
Oh, probably in like real life if I don't figure this out.
There's that blue button up on the top right.
Yeah, no, I see it. Hold on, let me get to my slideshow. Oh, if I see. Nope, sorry everyone. While I'm here, I get you. Share, copy link. We're gonna get this. All right, but you can't read ahead. Like there's a rule here. Yes, but no reading ahead. Not that I would know, but it's okay. Did it not? It's not. Sorry. I hate it. All right, copy link. And let's see if we can actually copy the link, paste the link. There we go. Okay, no looking ahead. Okay, then it's kind of good that we got there. Okay, so I want to go back for a second. And that is, right, as the camp breaks, Aaron and his son shall go in and take down the screening curtain and cover the Ark of the Pact with it, right? So even before what we just read, we have to think about, well, how did that work, right? So how did they remove it? So they had this idea that they would have these large wooden poles. They would lift the curtain with the poles, remove it from the hooks, but they would not lower it at once. So they would not glimpse the ark, which was penalty of death for others, right? Rather, they lowered this curtain a little at a time until they removed it and covered the ark. We can imagine that, right? We can imagine how it's slowly coming down and covering the ark such that people who are not supposed to see it are going to see it, because we know that when we get to that level of sacred, it's dangerous, right? It's physically dangerous, probably because it's spiritually dangerous. Spiritual is not a word they would have used back then, right? But we get it, right? We're in a realm of danger. So very carefully how they lay it down. So when we get to what I just read, the question is, right, we have this start with the blue layer, right? What is on top, right? So they shall lay a covering of dolphin skin over it and spread a cloth of pure blue on top. So if you want to do a quick chat writing, please do. In terms of, so what's on top? Do you think the blue is what then can be seen? Or the dolphin skin? And remember, the dolphin skin, and yes, we have lots of things we could say about how do you get dolphin skin, and is that a mistranslation? But the idea is that that's going to obviously protect anything under dolphin skin from everything, right? From dust, from rain, from anything, right? So there's a logic to having the dolphin skin on top. right? But there's an identifier or something about having the blue on top, and the blue, as you're answering in our chat, the blue is techelet. So again, I'm sorry I didn't put it in the Hebrew, especially for this particular word, but the techelet, thank you, Ezra, because you put that in, is uh, the blue that is on the seat that for a long time they couldn't find the right color, whatever. Now some people are finding the right color again, but whatever, right? It's the same word, tachelet. And so, there's a logic to it, as well as there is, oh, we got a whole thing from Richard. Were I to read this, I'd have to yeah, there it is. Thank you for that. Right, right, gives us a background. But we still have this question, right, of what goes on top, because it's kind of not clear. And is this a big deal? I don't know, but based on what I'm calling this uncover, recover, discover, I'm hoping it's kind of a big deal as we try to think about, how does this look? So yeah, so we're very taken with Tachelet. Thank you, and we should be absolutely. And I'm going to go on because we're not really, focused on the layers, but it's an interesting question to me. Unless the dolphins were kind of transparent, or it's not dolphin skin at all, but you wouldn't see the blue. So then why does it have to be blue, right? Is it blue not for the purposes of others to see it, but for a kind of more, hidden purpose, right? Because we have the table of display, again, we have the blue cloth, but then we have a crimson cloth. So we have changed colors, right? And we're going to change colors some more as we go through, right? So as we continue into this text, I want to just say one other thing, and that is that the cloth that is laid on it is called beged, and in fact it's pure blue, a cloth of pure blue. The others have blue tachelet, but this has Khalil tachelet. And the description, no, not the description, sorry, what it is describing is beged. Beged is usually a word just for cloth, clothing, what people wear, what human beings wear. It's actually kind of unusual to use it for this kind of text. And so what do you do with that, right? Any thoughts about why are they using a human related clothing term for what is being uh, covered here? Any thoughts on that? Why is this a human related term?
So Paula in the chat mentioned a little bit earlier that maybe this has to do with the holiness of the object. We cover the Torah. There are other ritual objects that we cover, so maybe this is a sign of reverence.
Fabulous. And I see Ezra, so thank you for catching that for me, because again, it's hard to keep an eye on the chat. Ezra, right, closeness to the people, it is holy but not human. That's fabulous, right? But if we think about it, we can pause to say, yeah, Techelet was hard to come by, especially since it was from some kind of snail and you're like in the middle of the wilderness. That makes it extra hard to, get your supply trains coming in. But at the same time, the idea of that it's not only the color, but it's the way the fabric is talked about. So I just think it's really powerful. I think this idea in Jewish Study Bible, they say that the objects here are treated with that same respect. Even like royalty, because of the colors that we are going to see, right? Yeah, dolphin skins are pretty scarce in the desert too. They're probably hanging out with the snails, right? Yeah, so, and that royalty question, color, and we're going to come back. So we're all about the colors here, right? Okay. We just want to mention that all of the bread and so forth, right? It's the 12 loaves of bread changed on Shabbat, right? And so forth. So when we get into crimson for verse 8, any thoughts about why have we switched to crimson? And in Hebrew, and again, apologies, right? But we have Beged Tola Ad Shani, and so it's a dyed crimson. We've changed color. And as we're going to see, we're going to change color again. So and if anyone has a thought, hierarchy of colors is interesting, right? That Tachelet clearly would be number one, right? And then it gets a little bit confusing because Argaman, which is kind of a purpley color, is coming next. Yes, thank you, Mara, for putting that in as well. Again, I'll have to find my balance here with this much text of putting in the Hebrew, it just seemed too much. Yeah, and then we go back to blue, right? So it's not, yeah, so it's a labeling system, right? What is the cloth actually made of, right? There's a lot of questions that are happening here. And also if it's a labeling system and if Tachelet blue is at the top, we go to crimson and then we go back to blue. And in the next slide, in a second, we're going to see that we're at blue again, right? And so it's hard if it's that. It might be that from afar, oh, those are the blue things. So we know based on their size, perhaps what they are, or what kind of poles they have, right? There would be like sockets and poles so that you're not actually touching these objects, but the poles would rest on the shoulders of the Kohathites, because remember, they're the ones who are carrying this. So when we have all of this happening, there's a lot of kind of question of why these colors, right? Are they making sense? And how are they chosen, right? Clearly, we have them elsewhere in the construction of the tabernacle that we heard before, right? In Leviticus and more so in Exodus, right? So it's really interesting to look at what colors these are, right? And in terms of, right, crimson as a translation versus purple, which is going to be a different translation in a second. Just, what's the ratio if you go to Lowe's and you say, okay, I want, this color, how much blue do they put in? How much red do they put in? Right. That whole matching thing in terms of all of that. So it's really interesting because it goes back to what does the translation say and how do they come to that from the Hebrew? So with that, let's continue through this text. Next, again, we're back to blue, right? Next, they shall spread a blue cloth over the altar of gold and cover it with a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put its poles in place to carry it. They shall take all the service vessels with which the service in the sanctuary is performed, put them into a blue cloth, and cover them with a covering of dolphin skin, which they shall then place on a carrying frame. And again, dolphin skin on the outside, unlike what we saw before, makes the most sense to protect it, but you really aren't going to see the blue, right? Unless a little sticking out of the bottom or whatever it is, right? The blue seems to take on a different purpose that way rather than identification. They shall remove the ashes from the copper altar and spread a purple cloth over it. Upon it, they shall place all the vessels that are used in its service, the fire pans, the flesh hooks, the scrapers, and the basins, all the vessels of the altar, and over it they shall spread a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put its poles in place. So we have a lot of things happening here. The altar of gold is also called the altar of incense, if we're thinking, wait, what's the altar of gold? And then in 13, right, when we're looking at this altar, right, with the ashes removed, it's in the courtyard, right? So all the objects within the sanctuary had already been covered. And now, again, we get into purple. Some commentaries are going to say, and again, they're calling it in Hebrew, argaman, which is, right, then we have to dig into like, how do you translate argaman, right? Purple doesn't seem to have enough shades to it. But they suggest that it's red purple as opposed to blue purple, right? And I don't know what's better purple if we're saying that blue tachelet is at the top, at the top of the pecking order of colors biblically, then maybe blue purple is a better mix than red purple, right? A redder purple is interesting, right? I'm going to push through because I want to get to what we're going to get to in the discussion. When Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sacred objects and all the furnishings of the sacred objects at the breaking of camp, only then shall the Kohathites come and lift them, so they do not come in contact with the sacred objects and die. And remember how the Kohanim covered them carefully, right? These things in the tent of meeting shall be the porterage of the Kohathites. Responsibly shall rest with Eleazar son of Aaron, the priest, for the lighting oil, the aromatic incense, the regular meal offering, and the anointing oil, responsibility for the whole tabernacle and for everything consecrated that is in it or in its vessels. So that's interesting, right? In other words, they're going to come and they're going to collect everything that's needed, right? You can't do much with an oil lamp if you don't have the oil, right? And it seems that the Kohathites are still going to carry it, but we're a little unclear now, right? We don't know exactly how this stuff that's at a different level, let's say, of sacred, is going to be carried. It just says that Eleazar is going to be in charge of overseeing it, but we don't know what happens, which to me is kind of interesting, right? In terms of, okay, we were pretty specific on the colors and the layers, but now we're not really having this. So if we look now and go into the symbolism of the colors, with thanks to Daniel Lowenstein, who put this together, we're going to see how this goes, right? So the ark is, and forgive my, I only had so many choices of colors, so I did my best. The ark covered with the curtain of the Holy of Holies, then with the protective hide, then with the cloth of techelet, blue wool. So the interpretation that he's looking at, right, is the order of covering. I think it's a little less clear, but I think he did a great job putting this together. The table, also covered with a cloth of techelet, then its vessels were put on top of the cloth, then covered with a cloth of tola'at shani, red wool. That question, I think, was in the chat. And finally, with a protective hide. The menorah and all of its vessels covered with the cloth of techelet, then placed in a protective hide that hung from a pole. The incense altar covered with a cloth of techelet, then with a protective hide, then the various other vessels placed in a cloth of techelet, then placed in a protective hide that hung from a pole. The outer altar covered with a cloth of argamon, purple wool. So we really have okay, let's put it all together. What is covered with what? What does it look like? So he brings forward, Daniel Lowenstein brings forward Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch's interpretation of what with the colors and how is all of that working. So I know it's a little small, my apologies. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch sees in the fabrics symbolic representations of 4 levels of life, all of which he argues are present in, we'll say, people. Sheish, linen, comes from flax, which is a plant. This represents the core aspects of life, like growth, nutrition, respiration, and reproduction. Man is alive in all these basic senses, just as plants are. Next comes tola'at shani, wool, an animal product dyed red. This symbolizes animal life, but at its most basic elemental level, it's a color of blood representing instinct, desire, and mobility. A third tier, a more sophisticated level of life, is represented by argaman, a color within the red family, but a color that's nobler, Rabbi Hirsch suggests, than pure red. And this might be related to the frequent connection made between purple and royalty, as we said. It symbolizes mankind's unique ability to master desire and instinct and become a noble creature, a moral creature. And finally, there's a fourth tier, something even more sophisticated, techelet, the color of sky and the sea, the color of all that is distant and transcendent. It represents the divine, which is also a part of man, who is created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. So we really get into the idea of how this moves forward. And so in terms of Daniel's understanding of this, he goes on quoting Rabbi Hirsch, but he says and forgive me, I'm reading at you for a second. We can make sense of the cloths used to cover the vessels. Naturally, one would expect the vessels housed in the holy chambers used in the service of the divine to be covered in the divine color techelet. The showbread and the vessels involved in production, symbols of physical sustenance and necessity common to all animate creatures, are covered in tola'at shani, the fabric representing primal animal life. And the outer altar, the only vessel that lived outside the holy chambers, served as a vehicle for the Israelites to acknowledge their sins and atone for them, a place that embodied the effort to be better and grow closer to God. And that's warranted its being covered with argaman, the fabric that represents people's capacity for morality. It's possible to view the inner walls of the Mishkan as a border, indicating where people's world stops, the place where our world stops and God's place begins. So I think it's really powerful, right? In terms of coloring, in terms of layering, in terms of all of this. I can't wait to read this chat, and I am jealous of you who can read the chat. But I am going to push forward to this next part of the text. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Do not let the group of Kohathite clans be cut off from the Levites. Do this with them, that they may live and not die when they approach the most sacred objects. Let Aaron and his sons go in and assign each of them to his duties and to his porterage. But let not the Kohathites go inside and witness the dismantling of the sanctuary, lest they die." I think it's really interesting because to me, it means, in a sense, the Kohathites themselves are covered and layered, right? The protectionary devices here, right, are make sure that all of this goes according to plan, that they are not cut off from the Levites, and even, more importantly, that they may not die when they approach these most sacred objects. So when we think about this, they can't even glance what they're covering, right? They can't even take a glance because it could be fatal, right? So it's interesting well, why is that? Why is it that they are not allowed to see it? We know that it's sacred. If you wanted to go to 1 Samuel 6:19, you'd see 57,000 men were killed by God for having dared to look inside the ark that the Philistines had captured. So we understand the danger, and that would be a different study. But why not? Why can't they look at it? So anyone have thoughts of what was so wrong with looking at this? I'm going to take a second to let you type. Anyone?
I see some people typing, but would you repeat the question one more time?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. The question is, why was it that the Kohathites who are carrying all of these sacred vessels were not allowed to see them on penalty of death? What would be the problem, right? So I'm seeing some of the answers, right? Exposing the presence of God, right? Objectifying the sacred vessels and worshiping them, which is really interesting. By the way, I grew up classical reform, and I believe that one of the reasons that the Torah was not processed, there's no such thing as hakafot, was the idea of it kind of was idolatrous, right? You reach out, if you look at it from someone, from somewhere else, right? You take your talit or your siddur and you touch it and you kiss it and you kind of bow down at times, right? Kind of with it toward the ark and whatever it is. There are times when, right, things can become looking like that. Questions have been brought to me. Don't ask me in the chat because I don't know the answer. But I brought it to Catholic priests about, if you're praying to Mary, right, and you're lighting candle at the statue of Mary, is that idolatry? It's not part of the Godhead. And I ask it obviously respectfully, but it's an interesting question, right? So, right, I'm looking really quickly at this, right? Right, most can't see the face of God, and yet it's still right. different than God's face, but absolutely right, whatever God's face even means, right? But fair enough, good example, right? So Abravanel says this: it's in case the Kohathite clan stare at the objects and fall into a mystic trance, unable to do their work, that they're gonna, they're gonna, right, be so taken with it, right? Hirsch says the Kohathites might become too accustomed to the routine of seeing the sacred objects packed and unpacked, lest they die spiritually, he writes, losing their capacity to see the tabernacle as holy. Right. And I kind of think about that, right? I think about the kids who jump off the bema, right? And I say to them, this room is only as holy as we make it, right? But if we see it as, oh, that's a fun place to jump off, as opposed to, hey, this is a recreation of going up to Mount Sinai, right? We see it differently. So let's think about the idea of covering and uncovering and discovering, especially in our Mishkan-less Jewish world, right? We don't have the tabernacle, we don't have the temple, right? And so let's just take a few minutes, and I'm glad that I spoke so quickly that we have a few minutes. Let's think about, what do we cover and uncover in Jewish life? So if anybody would start to think about this, right? Thank you. You're putting that in there. I'm trying to see if I can save the chat, and it's not letting me, but that's probably me. I got it. Okay. While I'm waiting for you so I can read everybody's everything. Okay. All right. So all right, I'm just going to say some of these out loud for all of you who can't follow the chat either. Challah, heads. We cover the dead. Dressing modestly is a type of cover. Torah, our bodies, our hair, our eyes when lighting Shabbat candles, mirrors after a death. Hold on. The bride at the chuppah, who is first covered and then uncovered, right? Absolutely, that's a great example. Thanks. I did figure out how to save the chat. I was just looking in the wrong place. But thanks to Mike for helping me. Yeah, I'm just looking at this chuppah, saying the Shema. So keep going. I'm just going to say, right, as I was looking at this parsha, thinking, what angle do I want to come at? And then I thought about this uncovering or covering and uncovering and recovering and so forth. I think it's just really interesting of, actually, we have a lot of covering happening, right? This is really a ritual that we do all the time in an awful lot of different contexts, right? As we just saw in the chat. I think of also a kittel, right? And we said the mate, the deceased, but if somebody is wearing a kittel to lead the Passover Seder, also to get married, right? I'm just thinking if I have other ones. I don't know if I would actually count this, but I wrote it in my own notes. Tzchach, right? The most important part of the sukkah is the roofing. And there are a lot of rules about the roofing, right? In terms of, right, how it can be chosen and whatever it was. I won't go into it. I would even challenge us to think about circumcision, right? Is that an uncovering in a sense, right? Granted, not a recovering, right? But an uncovering. I just think it's really interesting in terms of all of this, right? Somehow, the blintzes with sour cream. I'm looking at strawberries. I'm like, what are you all talking about? Yes, there you go. That's very funny. Okay, right. So we have a lot of different examples of this, and I invite you to really think about, and even unmute if Mara will give us permission, of what we discover when we choose to cover and to uncover. And I just will give you this example for me of the challah cover. The idea is simply to make it not feel bad. It's the last thing being blessed, right? So it has this cover, usually a very pretty cover, sometimes a beautiful cover, which is made by preschoolers, right? Whatever it might be. I mean, we have covers from when we went to Cuba, when our daughter went to India. We love the Jewish World of Challah covers, right? And so, so with that, you know, the idea of it being last and feeling badly, that we can imagine what it feels like, right? When we're last, when human beings are last, and we feel badly, that this inanimate though delicious object is teaching us this lesson by being covered, so we can't see or hear what the blessings are for the candles and kiddush and the children, and right, all that comes, right? But perhaps it even tastes different. If I had a challah out uncovered on a Tuesday, I think it tastes different in a sense than if it's covered. So with that, any other thoughts about this idea of covering and uncovering and discovering and recovering and all of that? Any other thoughts, whether you want to unmute or whether you want to put it into the chat, please do. Now everyone's making me hungry, so gee. Okay. And I will again repeat, just because no one's yet unmuting themselves, is that I do think it's really interesting that the Kohathites, to me, really are, in a sense, covered, not physically, but by all of the protectionary devices. So, okay, Ezra, please.
We'll go to Ezra and then Kathy in our last 2 minutes.
Great.
Well, thanks, Rabbi. This is fantastic. I love this. Thank you so much. As I mentioned in the chat, in our prayer service, Ufros Alenu Sukat Shlomecha. I mean, that's got to be like the ultimate covering, right?
I love that. I love that. That's so great. Do you want to translate for everyone?
And cover us with your peace, with your sukkah of peace.
Yes, which is so powerful. Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Kathy.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. What a great conversation. Beautiful. Thank you. I think about the masks we wear in life and how that covers our actual identity. So when you say, what do we cover in life? There's always a conversation in Torah about the masks we wear and when we uncover ourselves of those masks.
I love that. And it's so powerful, right? When we take it, and nowadays sometimes they're physical masks, right? But I love that. And the idea of sometimes we put on a mask in life, in a sense, in order to be more protectionary of ourselves, right? And sometimes we're hiding, which is not necessarily so healthy for ourselves. But I love that. So as we take this forward into this Shabbat, maybe we'll continue, maybe we'll look a little bit extra at our challah covers in particular, but maybe we'll really think about this idea again of covering, uncovering, recovering, and discovering. And I thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. This was a very colorful conversation. I loved it. And thank you, Kathy and Ezra, for, we're about to enter Shabbat, and then we're going into the holiday of Shavuot, but you both somehow connected us to masking and Purim, and Sukkot, the Sukkot of peace. So Rabbi, before we end, I would love if you could leave us with a short bracha intention as we go into Shabbat and maybe even into the holiday of Shavuot.
So as we enter into this wilderness of Bamidbar, of this book of Torah and Torah portion, and ideally enter into the wilderness of being ready to receive the Torah that God is giving on Mount Sinai, with plinths covered in sour cream and strawberries and all the things that you said, right? May it be that we are enabling ourselves to uncover and be really present in every way that we can in order to stand at Sinai with pride and with gratitude and with the feeling of being together with all others on Shavuot and beyond.
Thank you
Shabbat
so much. Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Bye-bye.